For 9 years, I paid rent to my parents like clockwork. No reminders, no late payments, no questions asked. I was their responsible daughter, the one who didn't complain, didn't argue, and didn't expect much. My younger sister Emma, on the other hand, hadn't paid a single dime since she turned 18. She still lived in her childhood room, decorated with fairy lights and unpaid luxury. She was the golden child, adored, pampered, and shielded from reality. I lived in the converted guest room by the garage. They said it was temporary, but that temporary turned into nearly a decade. I painted the walls myself, installed a tiny fridge, even repaired a leak in the ceiling one rainy winter. I never made a fuss. When my mom asked for extra help with groceries or bills, I gave it. When my dad needed his car fixed, I paid the mechanic directly. But not once did they call it my home. Not once did I feel like I truly belonged there. One evening during dinner, my sister joked in front of everyone, "Well, she's just renting, right? So technically she's not really family anymore." The table burst into laughter. My parents didn't defend me. My dad casually added, "She's independent, like a tenant. That's what she always wanted." Something cracked inside me. I swallowed my food slowly, pretending I didn't hear. But that sentence, "not really family anymore," looped in my mind for weeks. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. I started gathering evidence, bank transfers, cash withdrawals, receipts for repairs, even text messages where they asked me for money. It was all there, years of blind loyalty and quiet obedience, documented and ready. And then I looked into the ownership of the house. To my surprise, they had refinanced it twice and were months behind on payments. They had even considered selling it, but couldn't find a buyer to meet their emotional value price. They had no idea I had a savings account. No clue I had invested my side income into quiet stock growth. No one in that house asked how I was doing. They just assumed I was surviving. But I was building. 3 weeks later, while my parents were out celebrating Emma's engagement dinner, one I wasn't even invited to, I called a private buyer. I told him I wanted to buy the house. Not tomorrow. Now the money was ready, and I would handle the mortgage payoff. In return, I wanted one thing: full ownership under my name. He agreed, thrilled at how fast I moved. The day they came home, the mailbox held a letter they weren't expecting, a notice of title transfer. Their laughter died the moment they realized what it meant. They asked, confused, "What's this about?" I stood in the kitchen, the one I once scrubbed alone every Sunday morning, and smiled. "It's a notice of sale. I own this house now." My mom went pale. My dad blinked like he hadn't heard me right. "But you're just a tenant," my mother whispered. I stepped forward, handed her a folder. "Correction, I was a tenant who paid off your debt. And now, I'm the landlord." The silence after my announcement felt like a slow-burning fire. My mother stood frozen in the hallway, gripping the deed papers like they might disappear. My father, red-faced, began to stammer, "This has to be illegal. You can't just—" "I can," I said calmly, sliding a stack of receipts across the table. And I did. Every transfer, every bill, every repair I covered for this house, I've got a paper trail 9 years long. You called me a tenant, so I acted like one. And a smart tenant buys out their landlord. Emma, still dressed in her designer pink from the engagement dinner, stepped into the room looking confused. "Wait, what's going on? What do you mean you bought the house?" My eyes met hers. "The house you always said felt too small for your big dreams? It's mine now. So if you need space, I suggest you start packing." My mom's voice trembled. "You're being dramatic. We didn't mean what we said. Families joke." "Joke?" I laughed bitterly. "You made me sleep in the laundry room when Emma's dog had anxiety. You charged me full rent but didn't charge her anything. You told relatives I was just helping out around the house, while you threw parties using the electricity I paid for. You called me a tenant. Not once did you call me your daughter." They had nothing to say, and for once, I didn't fill the silence. I let them sit in it, just like I had sat with their dismissiveness for years. The next morning, I had a locksmith change every lock. I left a typed letter on the table, giving them 2 weeks to either begin paying rent to me or leave. No emotion, no argument, just the reality they had created, now flipped. What they didn't know was that I had already listed the house privately. A local couple who had admired the neighborhood but couldn't afford inflated prices were thrilled when I offered it to them below market value. I explained that it wasn't about the money. It was about starting fresh, for all of us. A week later, my parents tried to throw an apology dinner. Emma brought a cake that read, "Welcome home, landlady." It was meant to be funny. I didn't laugh. I stood, thanked them for the meal, and handed them their formal eviction papers. 30 days. No exceptions. "You're being cruel," my father muttered. "No," I said, folding the napkin in my lap. "Cruel is making your daughter pay to live in a storage room while your other daughter gets spa weekends. Cruel is mocking the only person holding this house together." As they left that night, Emma shouted from the car window, "You'll regret this when you're alone." But I wasn't alone. I was finally free. A month later, the couple moved in. They painted the walls, planted sunflowers where my mother's broken lawn chairs once sat. The wife hugged me during closing and whispered, "I don't know what you went through, but you just gave us a miracle." I smiled, handing over the keys. "Number you're giving me one." Outside, I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the house. For 9 years, it had been a cage with doilies and polite smiles. Now, it was someone else's beginning, and no longer my prison. 3 weeks later, while they were out shopping for new patio furniture with Jessica, ironically for the very deck I had rebuilt with my own savings, I submitted the paperwork. The house wasn't in my name, no. But my grandmother's will included a clause rarely honored, but absolutely legal. Any child who has financially contributed to the upkeep of the property for over 5 years shall be deemed an equal stakeholder. That clause, along with my detailed rent records, utility payments, and renovation expenses, gave me grounds not just to claim equity, but to force a sale. When they came home and saw a notice pinned to the front door, "Notice of partition action, property in legal review," Mom turned pale. Dad stormed into my room, which was mostly empty by now. "What the hell is this?" he roared. "That," I said calmly, "is what you hand tenants when you forget their family." They called me ungrateful. They screamed betrayal. But it was their words. "You're not family, just a tenant," that had broken something sacred. And now, I wasn't going to fight for their approval. I was going to claim what was rightfully mine. The process wasn't quick. Legal proceedings took a few months, but the evidence was overwhelming. My grandmother's clause, combined with years of financial contribution, gave the court enough reason to approve the sale. With me as one of the legal sellers, my parents were forced to either buy me out or sell the property. They chose the latter, likely thinking they'd get a bigger payout. But here's where they underestimated me again. See, in that time, I'd been working with a real estate developer, someone I met through my job at the architecture firm. He offered me a loan to purchase the house outright, not to live in it, but to renovate, flip it, and make a statement. The day the property went into my name, I changed the locks before sunset. Mom showed up the next morning, banging on the door, phone in hand. "You stole our home." "No," I replied from the porch. "I paid for the home for 9 years, and now I own it, like any good tenant would." She cried. Dad muttered something about betrayal again. Jessica stood behind them, arms folded, like she still thought she was the star of the story. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was done trying to earn a seat at their table. I was building my own. And before they left, I handed them a certified letter. It was a rental application. I hear you're looking for a place. Market rate's gone up since I moved in, but you're welcome to apply. I smiled. They didn't take it. But I know they'll never forget it. The neighborhood gossip started almost immediately. The for sale sign had barely been taken down before Mrs. Halpern from across the street was already on her front porch, squinting through her sunglasses. "Isn't that the Miller girl?" she whispered to another neighbor. "Didn't they say she was just renting the basement?" Oh, the irony. Now I was the property owner. And not just of the house, but of the narrative they'd tried to write for years, that I was nothing more than a background character in my sister's spotlight. They used to say I lacked ambition, that I needed their roof to survive. But in reality, they had needed me, my money, my silence, my reliability. Now that all of that was gone, their structure, emotional and financial, was collapsing. A week after the sale was finalized, I began renovations. The first thing to go? The ridiculous Jessica's Spa bathroom setup they'd let her build with pink marble and a tacky chandelier. I smashed it with a sledgehammer myself. Each swing felt like letting go of another lie they told me growing up. Then came my favorite moment. In the living room, right above the fireplace, there had always been a family portrait. Me, tucked in the corner, half-shadowed. Jessica front and center. The photo that screamed, "You're part of the picture, but not the family." I took it down, framed something new in its place. A single sheet of paper, my rent receipts, every one of them, labeled, dated, and stapled into a collage that said, "I earned this." But the final twist? The letter. While sorting through some old papers in what used to be the attic, I found a box labeled with my name. Odd, because I'd never had attic privileges. Inside were old drawings I'd made as a child, cards from school, even a letter addressed to me, from my grandmother. It read, "If you're reading this, it means the house is in dispute. I knew things might end up this way. Just know, sweetheart, I saw everything, the chores, the late nights, the bills you paid without ever being asked. You are not a tenant. You are the heart of this home." I wept, not because I was sad, but because for the first time in a decade, someone had seen me, truly seen me. I got the letter framed, and I hung it in the front hallway where every guest would see it before they stepped inside. Because this wasn't just a house anymore. It was my story, and it had only just begun. A month after I reclaimed the house, I hosted a small gathering. Not a party, but a statement. I invited colleagues from work, the banker who helped me secure the purchase, a few neighbors, and just for poetic irony, the very agent who once told me, "You're probably not in the income bracket for this neighborhood." They were stunned. Some congratulated me with wide eyes, unsure whether I had won the lottery or struck gold. But I smiled and told the truth. No miracles, just years of being underestimated and overworked. Then, the day I secretly hoped for finally came. My parents. They came up the walkway like ghosts returning to a haunted house. My mother wore pearls, as if dressing up could fix history. My father's eyes darted around the newly renovated porch like he didn't recognize it, like he didn't recognize me. I didn't invite them in. "Is Jessica with you?" I asked. They exchanged a glance. "She's having a hard time," my mother said, "since she moved back in with us." "Back in?" I tilted my head. I thought she had her dream apartment. "She lost the lease and the job, and things have been hard for all of us." I let the silence speak. Then my father said the words I had been waiting nearly a decade to hear. But not like this. "We were wondering if there's any way we could stay, just until we figure things out." The silence cracked inside me, not with anger, but with a quiet power. I stepped aside, let them see the framed rent receipts, the grandmother's letter, the missing family photo they once treasured, now replaced with a simple gold plaque that read, "Not a tenant, not a shadow, the owner." I said, "You once told me I wasn't family, just a tenant." They both looked away. I continued, "So now I'll treat you the same way you treated me. If you want to stay here, you'll need to apply through the management company, market rates, first, last, and a security deposit. I hear the market's rough right now." Their jaws dropped. My mother choked out a whisper. "You don't mean that?" I leaned in. "I mean every word, just like you did when you said I didn't belong." They left without another word. But it wasn't revenge. It was resolution. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't beg to belong. I stood in my truth. And I didn't need anyone to open the door for me, because now I owned every key. It was strange how silence could be louder than shouting. After they walked away that day, my phone stayed quiet. No texts, no voicemails, just the lingering weight of everything they didn't say. But I wasn't broken. I was awake. Weeks passed, and with every sunrise, the house began to feel like mine, not just legally, but emotionally. I redecorated, but not out of vanity. I was reclaiming space. I painted over the hallway where Jessica's trophies once hung, the same hallway they refused to hang any of my art in because it wasn't worth framing. Now, that wall held framed letters from my college professors, thanking me for mentoring younger students. Above the fireplace, I placed a photo of me holding the keys on the day the house became mine, smiling. Not because I was proud, but because I had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Then, one rainy afternoon, a knock. Not on the front door, on the back gate. Jessica. Her makeup was smudged, hair tied in a messy bun, hoodie soaked. For a second, I saw the sister I used to build blanket forts with before the world convinced her I didn't matter. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "Mom and Dad, they're a mess." I leaned against the doorframe. "What about the job they helped you get? The car Dad signed over to you? The apartment they paid the deposit on?" She bit her lip. "Gone. All of it. I screwed up." I wanted to feel superior. I wanted to be the villain in her story for once. But I also remembered what it felt like to have no one. To stand outside a house that used to be yours and wonder if anyone inside would care. "Come inside," I said. She blinked. "Really?" I nodded. "But this isn't the same house. And I'm not the same sister. You'll have to respect that." Inside, she stared at everything. How clean it was, how warm it felt, how much it didn't scream family drama. She sat at the kitchen island, the same spot she once mocked me from during dinner, when I brought up my plans to study finance. "Why'd you let me in?" she asked quietly. I poured her tea. "Because once, I believed you were better than how you treated me. I guess I'm giving you a chance to prove it." We sat in silence. This time, not the heavy kind, but something softer. Healing wasn't easy. Forgiveness wasn't automatic. But maybe, just maybe, boundaries didn't mean building walls. They meant opening doors with conditions. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because everything was okay, but because I was. And no matter who knocked, I'd never again open my door without first opening my eyes. Jessica traced her fingers along the kitchen counter, the one she used to laugh at for being too plain. Now it gleamed with quiet pride, just like me. She looked up at the ceiling, noticing the skylight I had installed. "You changed everything," she murmured. I smiled slightly, including myself. She hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket. A crumpled photo of us as kids. Me with braces, her missing a front tooth, both of us wrapped in the same blanket. "I kept this," she whispered. "Even when I didn't act like it, I missed you." My throat tightened. For years, I had begged for scraps of love. Now I had the power to give it, or withhold it. I took the photo, smoothed it, and placed it beside the tea. "This isn't about going back," I said. "It's about choosing who we want to be now." She nodded slowly. "I don't want to be like them." "You don't have to be," I replied, "but I won't carry your healing. You'll have to do that part." She wiped her eyes and nodded. For the first time in forever, we weren't playing roles written by someone else. We were starting a new script. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something better. I had peace. The silence that followed their cruel words was more painful than any argument. No apologies, no check-ins, just absence, loud and deliberate. For people who had once raised me, they sure found it easy to erase me like I was never there. But I wasn't the little girl who begged for their approval anymore. I was a woman with receipts, resources, and resolve. And now, I had a plan. I dug through 9 years of rent transfers, bank statements, grocery bills, utility receipts, all in my name. Every financial thread that proved I wasn't just a tenant. I was the backbone of that house. Quietly, I called a real estate attorney. And that's when things got interesting. Apparently, while my parents collected my rent, they never declared it legally. No rental agreement, no tax filings, just under-the-table money that helped them keep the house afloat. Even more shocking, they had refinanced the home several times without telling me, and they were now months behind on payments. The house wasn't just emotionally unstable, it was financially crumbling. And they thought I wouldn't find out? So I made a move they never saw coming. I bought the mortgage debt. Every overdue cent. I didn't need their permission, I needed leverage. And once I had it, I bought the lien. Legally, I became the primary stakeholder in the very house they said I didn't belong in, all without stepping foot in a courtroom. Yet, they received the foreclosure notice on a rainy Monday morning. My mom called within minutes, voice shaky with disbelief. "Please, tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding." "No," I said, voice calm and cold. "You told me I was just a tenant. And now, the tenant bought the building." My dad sent one message. "We didn't mean it like that." I stared at the screen for a full minute, then deleted it without replying. They begged, they wept, they tried to play the family card again. "You're destroying us," my mom cried. "We'll have nowhere to go." "You had no problem leaving me in emotional homelessness for 9 years, I whispered. "Now you know what it feels like." 2 weeks later, moving trucks arrived. My father avoided eye contact the entire time. My mother kept glancing at me, searching for even a flicker of sympathy. I gave them none. They had cashed in their love for control a long time ago. I stood on the porch they said would never be mine, and I watched them leave with boxes full of things, none of which held love. After the house was emptied, I walked through the rooms barefoot. My old room still had the dent in the wall from when I cried myself to sleep, year after year. In the attic, I found an old photo, our family vacation from years ago. They had literally cut me out of the frame. I smiled, slid it back into the drawer, and shut it without regret. The real estate photographer came to take listing photos. But before he started, I asked him for one thing. "Can you take just one picture of me?" I asked. "Of course," he said. So I stood in front of the house, alone, strong, beautiful, and free. Not cropped, not excluded, not forgotten. This time I wasn't just in the photo, I was the story, and I owned every brick of it. As I walked through the silent halls one last time, a strange calm washed over me. The echoes of old arguments had faded, the bitter stares, the slammed doors, the whispered insults they thought I couldn't hear. I stood where my childhood bed once was, the floor now bare. but I didn't feel empty. I felt released. Downstairs, I opened a drawer they never let me touch growing up. Inside were old documents, a broken necklace I thought I lost, and a birthday card I made for my mom when I was 6. She never opened it. It was still sealed. That told me everything. I took nothing from that drawer, except the card, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. Love should have never been a transaction. Outside, neighbors peeked through curtains, gossip already buzzing. I smiled politely. Let them wonder. Let them guess. The girl they used to pity had rewritten her ending. Later that evening, I opened a bottle of wine and watched the sunset from the porch swing they once told me not to sit on because it was for guests. Now I was the only guest that mattered. I posted the listing online with one line, available for new beginnings. And within hours, offers poured in. But I didn't sell right away. I let the house sit for a while, empty, like how they made me feel for nearly a decade. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud, sometimes it's just peace, and knowing the silence finally belongs to you. As night fell, I stood at the kitchen counter, where I had cooked countless meals for them without ever hearing a thank you. I ran my fingers along the chipped edge of the countertop, the same spot where my father once told me, "You should be grateful we even let you stay here." I stared at it for a moment, and then smiled, because now they were the ones begging for a chance to return. I walked to the thermostat and turned off the heating, not out of cruelty, but because it was time to let the house feel cold the way they made me feel for 9 years. Every unpaid hour, every ignored birthday, every time they called me just a tenant when I was the one keeping the lights on. I pulled out an old photo album. Most pictures had my sister grinning in center frame, while I was cropped, cut off, or conveniently missing. Funny how I was invisible in every memory, until I owned every brick of the house they once controlled. Suddenly, a message popped up on my phone. It was my mother. "We're staying in a motel. Please call, your father is getting sick." I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote a short email to my lawyer, finalizing the paperwork that would officially transfer the house title. To me, solely. No trace of their names, no loopholes left. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat on the living room floor, turned on music I love but they hated, and danced alone in the dark, laughing, free, because revenge doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with peace, with power, with finally being able to breathe in a home that no longer smells like fear. I slept in my old room that night, not as their child, but as its owner. And for the first time, I didn't dream of running away. I dreamed of starting over. A week passed, and the silence was golden. I didn't check in on them. I didn't ask if they were okay, because for once I wasn't the one picking up the emotional pieces. The guilt they thought I'd carry forever, I'd buried it under the very foundation of this house. But just when I thought they might finally give up, my father showed up, standing in the cold on the porch where he once refused to let me in during a thunderstorm, saying, "You're old enough to find your own way." Now he stood trembling, wet from rain, asking me for shelter. I opened the door just wide enough for him to speak. He looked older, smaller, but his voice hadn't changed much. "We didn't mean it like that," he muttered. You were just different, always too sensitive, too proud." I stared at him and said, "And now I'm just too successful to be your backup plan." I closed the door slowly, not to slam it, but to give him a taste of the quiet I lived in while they ignored my pain. The next day, I received a voicemail from my sister. Her voice cracked like glass. "They want to come home. Mom keeps crying. Dad hasn't been the same." She paused. "I know we treated you like you didn't belong, but can't you just let it go?" Let it go? I let go every time I paid rent and still wasn't invited to family dinners. I let go every time I was called the extra mouth. I let go when I had to walk past birthday cakes I didn't get to cut, gifts I never received, rooms I never had to myself. And now that I had let go of them, I felt whole. Still, I didn't block the number. Instead, I left a note at the motel they were staying at. It read, "You once said I was just a tenant, so pay rent and we'll talk." It wasn't about the money. It was about balance, about being seen, heard, respected. They wanted access to a life they had no part in building, and I wasn't giving it for free anymore. That night, I sat on the rooftop of the house, yes, the one they once told me I'd never afford on my own. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you," to my younger self, for surviving, for not giving up, for growing into the kind of woman they never believed I could become. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my worth, brick by brick, breath by breath. And now, the home was mine. Months later, the holidays came around again. Cold, glittering, and sharp like glass. The same season they used to decorate the house for everyone but me. Only this time the house wore new lights. A different glow. Not for them, but for the life I built in spite of them. I threw a holiday charity dinner in the backyard. Once their pride, and now my sanctuary. The guest list was full. Friends who became family, my mentor from college, the landlord who once let me stay rent-free when my parents kicked me out, and even the janitor from my first job who used to save snacks for me when I worked late shifts and came home hungry. They showed up uninvited. My mother stood there in borrowed heels and fading makeup. My father behind her, stooped, not from age, but from regret. My sister clutched a baby on her hip and looked around like she didn't recognize the life I'd built. I walked over calmly. My mother opened her mouth. "We were hoping to be included?" I finished, sipping my wine. Funny. I felt the same way for 9 years. "But this house," she said, gesturing weakly. "It was ours." It was, and for 9 years, I helped you keep it afloat while you mocked me, ignored me, and called me a burden. You told me I wasn't family, just a tenant. I took a step forward. So now consider yourselves guests, if I allow it, but not family. My father looked down. For once, he had no comeback. I handed my mother a small envelope. She opened it with trembling hands and pulled out a copy of the deed, with my name alone on it. I bought it legally, cleanly, and in full. This home belongs to the woman you never thought was enough. And now, it's the only place you can't call home. My guests clapped quietly, not mockingly, respectfully. Because they understood. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was the soft, sharp power of a woman they underestimated, a woman they tried to shrink, who now owned the very roof they once told her she was lucky to sleep under. They left silently. I walked back inside, looked around, and smiled. This place, this peace, this power, it was mine. Not because they gave it to me, but because they didn't. And that was the gift they never meant to give. The real inheritance wasn't in their will. It was in the strength I had to write my own. As the front door closed behind them, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply breathed. For the first time in years, it felt like I had my lungs back. I walked through the halls they once filled with silence and now echoed with laughter from people who saw me, who loved me, not out of duty, but choice. I lit the fireplace, not for warmth, but as a symbol that I had rebuilt everything they burned, that I had turned ashes into architecture. Outside, snow began to fall. Quiet, steady, pure, just like the peace in my heart. I curled up with a cup of tea and whispered to myself, I am not a tenant. I am the foundation. And they were just echoes of a chapter I finally finished.